The top is here. Lights on.
We'll see. Points at me. Enne juku kanangyo kanzeya namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en mopo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeya bonen kanzeya nen jushenki nen furishin kanzeya namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en popo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeya bonen kanzeya nen jushenki nen furishin kanzeya namu butsuyo butsu en yo butsu en popo so en jo rakuga jo chonen kanzeya bonen kanzeya nen jushenki nen furishin absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this, moment after moment the true heart arises. Time after time there is nothing but this absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. The pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this, moment after moment the true heart arises. Time after time there is nothing but this absorbing world sounds awakens a Buddha right here. This Buddha, the source of compassion. This Buddha receives only compassion. Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, just compassion. Thus the pure heart always rejoices. In the light recall this, in the dark recall this, moment after moment the true heart arises. Time after time there is nothing but this. Infinite realms of light and dark convey the Buddha mind. Birds and trees and stars and we ourselves come forth in perfect harmony. We recite our Gatha and our Sutra for the many beings of the world and dedicate our practice in grateful thanks to all our many guides along the ancient way. We especially dedicate these merits to those whose names we hold in the silence of our hearts, as well as those whose names we now voice aloud. May we live in perfect peace with Buddha Dharma, and may we realize the Buddha way together. Please prepare for sadhana. for King. At the sound of the clappers, the first and third rows will turn to the right, second row will turn to the left. Please turn to page 8 for the Song of Covenant. We, the Daishin Kokuji Sangha, with respect for the worth and dignity of each person, with wonder at the wisdom and compassion we seek to cultivate by practice, and with deep gratitude for the teachers of this lineage and our connection to one another, covenant to support each other by upholding the precepts of doing no harm, practicing good, and actualizing good for others. Please be seated for this evening's talk. Please sit comfortably and face towards our teacher. And on that same page, we will begin in a moment with the Gata Anugamya the Sutra. Gata on opening the sutra. The Dharma incomparably profound and infinitely subtle is rarely encountered even in millions of ages. Now we see it, hear it, receive and maintain it. May we completely realize the Tathagata's true meaning.
All right, good evening, everybody. Thank you very much for being here. Oh, yeah, it's great, isn't it? Zen training, isn't it wonderful? So, I guess a couple of things. One is, why am I wearing a baseball hat? Well, it turns out I have shingles, and I've got an outbreak up here, and the doctor said you're fine, and it won't spread or anything, it's not contagious, just make sure it's covered. So, okay, best practice, I get to wear my ball cap. And because I'm wearing a baseball cap, it feels funny to wear a decorum. I don't know why, it's my sartorial sense, what can I say? So I'm trying, this is Zen casual, I guess. And I guess it fits because Reverend Shokai wore the Raksu, heresy of heresies, to officiate. And of course, this arrangement is delightful. So it's all good, it's all good. I mean, I have to say, one of the things I've learned from my Zen training experience, one of the things that I've learned is that, your plans are just gestures of hope. I mean, you have some sense of what you foresee may occur, but it's really, we're very well advised to not hold on to these plans too awful darn tightly. Because, they collide with life, right? It's like Mike Tyson said, everybody's got a plan until I hit him in the mouth. Which, okay, you've got a plan for what your life is going to be until life socks you one right in the kisser, you know. I also learned I have osteoarthritis in both knees, so that's, you've been watching me perhaps most of the summer kind of hobbling around and trying to figure out what's going on. And is it a strain? Was it something I can massage out? Well, it turns out it's living a long time with certain genetic predispositions. And so, you know, I didn't plan to be the slowest person in the Kinyon Trail. I didn't expect I'm going to wear a baseball cap giving a Tay show. I sure didn't plan for the book to be that way or the drink to be out of reach. Or for exactly who's here now to be here now, right? And yet we all have some intent, we have some intention. And that intention is really beautiful. And then be very playful with what actually happens, right? Be very playful with what actually happens and enjoy it. I don't mind that the book was out of reach and backwards. I don't mind it at all. It's lovely. How often does that happen? Like, that's a first, guys. That is hard to do. That's awesome. You think? Oh gosh. So yeah. So that's a first. That's beautiful. And then the drink all the way over here. That's great. You know. And no, you know, I appreciate the vigilance to come up and fix it because you know how it's supposed to be. But actually, it's lovely to just let it play out. Let what happens happen. Be curious. How interesting. How interesting. Wow. I guess one of the things that Reverend Kaishan was saying a lot at the sewing when students would bring up their Raksu to him, he'd say, "Oh, how did that happen?" And I think Reverend Kaishan is onto something. I think that's a beautiful way to, how did this medial osteoarthritis, how interesting. I'm not happy about it. I'm no fan of the experience or of this shingles thing or whatever. But interesting. You know, for most of Homo sapiens history, we didn't live all that long, y'all. Right? I mean, people were gone. I mean, 35 was like, wow. Ooh, you know. So who had time to do anything? Honestly, right? Of course, some people, but so now, how interesting, how interesting. So one of the interesting things that has happened in the temple is that we had an AV person who was like professional and in the little room making it go, you know, and now they've moved on. They've got a great opportunity in Chicago, and bless them, they're off to grad school and broader horizons. And so the talk that happened Sunday didn't get recorded or broadcast or anything. How interesting. And yet, I feel the topic that I addressed is worth communicating to not just a few people who were in the room, whatever, 30, 50, however many people that was. Because I feel very compelled in light of the Pride Parade that we participated so handsomely in, and all of the activities that this Sangha has seen occur over this past summer. I mean, it's astonishing if you just do a brief inventory of all the rites of passage that have occurred in this one season, right? Denbo for Doan Sensei, the grand opening here, and the list goes on. We've had Reverend Secho has been ordained. We had our first month-long residential training program happen. We had a whole batch of new Jukai initiates, and I know I'm missing a lot, right? But in the midst of all of this, again, it's not like these are things that we need to plan for and make happen and check the box and get them done and then move on to the next set of things. It is not the point. You know, if we hurled through this summer's training experience with the attitude of checking everything off the list and doing it right and getting it done so that now we can arrive here, we've completely missed it. Completely missed it, right? The juice is actually in the unforeseen and being able to delight in it. Does that make sense? And I'm not saying everything is just unicorns and rainbows and glitter. It's not. This arthritis is not a joke. It's fucking with me. This thing hurts. It hurts. But I don't mind. How interesting, right? And in this process that we've all gone through together, as many of us as we can, something really miraculous has happened. Of course, Tenka's funeral, I mean, it just goes on and on. But what's happened is that the Dharma has been invoked and expressed by the community. It's not just interesting rituals that get done. It's the Dharma is manifested. And what's very interesting to me is after those events have occurred, the Sangha, the community, is deeper for it. Like that stays. That stays. That depth, that immersion in the Dharma, that experience of community together, it doesn't erode. The events themselves come and go, like way too quick. Like the pattern of the Han, it goes faster and faster as you get older. But the effect of actually engaging in those things, that's durable. That is resiliently with us. And one of the things that's developing here is we're making friends with each other. Actual friendships. And I'm compelled to speak about friendship because I see it happening in the Sangha and it delights me. It is one of the most challenging things that I see young people as a professor. I am always encountering the 18-year-olds anew every year, right? And I'm just amazed at how difficult it is for this generation to actually make meaningful connections. Just in my short 15-year tenure so far, I've seen a noticeable difference in this capacity to connect deeply, right? And no one's fault. It's not a fault thing. It's just the situation that we're in. And then now these kids coming in, most of their high school career was COVID. Like most of their high school career was COVID. Think about that. Think about how much developmental activity went down in high school. I'm a solid Gen Xer, so fortunately none of mine was documented. And I'm glad about that. But I mean, all that developmental stuff, good, bad, and ugly, happened differently. Let's say it at least like that. But here, somehow, some way, with our engagement with the practice, even during the COVID times, this friendship thing is actually continuing to develop and deepen and mature. And I would see it continue even further. I think it's amongst the many gifts of the Dharma, actually, is having good friends. Now, it turns out that the Buddha gave a lot of teachings on making friends. Long before it was like a Facebook, be my friend. The Buddha taught to many, many different kinds of people in many, many different situations and settings. Some royalty, some warrior class, some agrarian folks, some emergent city dwellers, monastics, lay practitioners, I mean, just a huge mix of folks. And one thing when you read the Buddhist teaching, you have to kind of read kind of between the lines and the spaces of the page, who is he talking to? Who was he likely connecting with? What's the situation? We can never know for sure. In many cases, a few we do. But here, I would like to talk a little bit from this Anguttara Nikaya, which is a sutta in the Pali tradition. And this is a discourse the Buddha gave called The Qualities of a True Friend. The qualities of a true friend. Thus I heard. Once the Buddha said, the qualities of a true friend. Monks, one should associate with a friend who possesses 7 factors. What 7? They give what is hard to give. They do what is hard to do. They patiently endure what is hard to endure. They reveal their secrets to you. They preserve your secrets. They do not forsake you when you are in trouble. They do not roughly despise you. One should associate with a friend who possesses these 7 factors. And then there's a little stanza here, or 2 or 3. A friend gives what is hard to give and does what is hard to do. They forgive you your harsh words and endure what is hard to endure. They tell you their secrets, yet preserve your secrets. They do not forsake you in difficulties, nor do they roughly despise you. The person here in whom these qualities are found is a friend. One desiring a friend should resort to such a person as this. Now, in this list, some things are kind of self-evident, and a few of them might be surprising. First of all, it's important to realize that all of this was written way before things were written down. It's an oral tradition, wisdom tradition that was passed down. And so in all oral traditions, remember that there are certain human beings that was their gig, to remember these things. There are those who have sung the Upanishads and the Rig Vedas for centuries, and it's their job. And we can do that. Human beings are amazing at that. And one of the things that they do is things are connected by numbers. So you see the 7 factors of this and the 5 aspects of that and the 3 of these and the 2 of those, because when you space out and can only remember 3 of them, you know you've lost a few. That's why. Okay, so here's the first. They give what is hard to give. Now, when we look at these together, I invite us all to consider them both ways. The Buddha here is speaking in terms of you shopping, you considering whether a person would be a friend, but also it's advice on how to be a friend. Can you imagine if we actually learned how to be really good friends, like we learn math? Like we learn history. I wish we learned history better, but even just like friendship, like how to really do that, especially when you're young and hormones come on and you're trying to figure out what and who you are and what it means and all this. And we're basically left, at least in my time, you're basically feral. It's left to might makes right and clicks, who's in, who's out, all this kind of stuff. Imagine if there was actual guidance, how to be a friend and how to tell when someone isn't one. Can you imagine any time in your life where it would have been nice had you had a clue that that person really wasn't one? So they give what is hard to give. What comes to mind? I mean, there are many things that are hard to give. But for me, when I read these words and reflect, it's time. Time. There's a lot of things I can give that don't really cost much of me. But time, there's only so much, yo. And when you invest, like we're all investing this time together right now, you can't get this back. You may wish you could, I hope not. But once the time has been expended, it's done. And we only, so to speak, have so much of it. So this willingness to be present, to actually give time, this is an important consideration. They do what is hard to do. In other words, friendship is here, the Buddha is pointing to, not just because it's easy. You know, some friendships or acquaintances, pleasant acquaintances even that you have, it's because the situation is comfortable. All the situation is lined up nice and cozy, everything's nice and comfortable, there's a shared interest of one kind or the next, and so you get along well enough, and that's lovely. That's totally lovely. It doesn't quite rise to friendship yet, though, at least not what I hear the Buddha saying. Friendship has this other business where they do what is hard to do together. They patiently endure what is hard to endure. And this means you. Believe me, any friend of mine has had to endure me. That's kind of how it works, right? And anybody you're going to be friends with, you have to endure them. And I don't think it's too strong a word to use. Endure. There's this kind of quality to the word. It's kind of like staying with, right? Enduring, resilient. There's this steadfastness there, right? And situations will always vacillate between favorable and neutral and unfavorable. There's no way to stop that from being the case. That will always be the case. It's always been the case. As long as you're a case, that'll be the case, right? Favorable, neutral, adverse. Around and around it goes. Friendship can't depend on that. It simply can't. If your friendship is always based on things being pleasurable and pleasant, it won't endure, because reality just isn't like that, honey. Not for anybody. It's one of the great challenges, I think, in the younger generation is they've lived in a very curated visual world where the thing on the Instaface is exactly pristinely beautiful all the time, right? And we know that that person is not, you take that same body and position it a little differently and suddenly it looks quite different. You know what I'm saying? You take that same person who just posted how fabulous, and 3 hours later they're sobbing on the bathroom floor, rolling backward and forward and can't breathe. But you'll never see that. And that's a loss. Because if that person isn't willing to be vulnerable that way, they'll never have a true friend. A true friend would see that and say, hey, what's happening? Can I help? Not, oh, be gone. You know, there's a teaching in the about the God realms that beings who elevate themselves up to the heaven realms, the God realms, have very long and beautiful lives, very pleasurable, very sensual, very pleasure-oriented, subtle or gross. But like all things, it's impermanent, and so once the karma that got them there wears out, they begin to rot. They begin to age in this ageless, ever youthful, ever beautiful environment. Suddenly, what? And the God's like, what's happening to me, guys? And they're like, oh, dude. And they back away. And, it is said that they offer flowers at the end of long poles. Oh, here, have a flower. But they won't go near for fear of their own, right? Kind of interesting. In a way, it recapitulates the Buddha's own encounter with old age, sickness, and death as a youth. Now, they reveal their secrets to you, and they preserve your secrets. Now, the language here, I'm so terribly fond of Bhikkhu Bodhi. Everybody probably knows that. I fawn on him anytime I use his translation, and I'm sure this word is correct, but I fear it's unhelpful. I think the connotation when we hear the word keeps your secrets, in our conspiratorial age of polarization and fake news, it seems something other than probably what's intended. When I read this, I feel in the heart of it that a friend holds your relationship in confidence. A friend is someone that you can be completely transparent with and know that you're in a confidential space to do that. And the Buddha here is saying that's a value. Like you need some of that. You need space where you can just let what hair you have down and you can really just be honest and know that what you're sharing isn't broadcast all over the Instagram or even brought up at conversation. Back in my day, it wasn't posted on anything. We had billboards back then, all right? Like cork ones with posters, flyers, and stuff. We didn't post things on those really. But we would talk, in high school. There was a gossip network for sure. And I went to an all-guys high school, so even the guys did it, But a friend was someone who could really, understand that we're talking together here in confidence, right? And sometimes people think, well, if I'm practicing the Mahayana, then I should always be completely transparent and completely open with everyone all the time in all ways. And the Buddha is not saying that. There are some times where we just need to process and we need to vent and we need to try out different options with a friend and talk it aloud and see how it feels. Do you know what I'm talking about? Like you can actually explore it with your language and see, is that what I want to do? Without worrying about, this is all just going to be front page news. This is a very important point because keeping secrets is not good. If you imagine a family dynamic where there's a bunch of secrets being kept, it just doesn't smell right. That just doesn't sound right. But if a family understands healthy confidentiality as appropriate to people's experience, well, that's great. It's something like that. That's how I feel it. And so learning how to keep confidentiality is a skill, actually. And you can think about your own friendships. Do your friends know that if they share something in confidence, that that's where it will be held? You can be sure that the leadership at the temple, the clergy, this is a really important point. Being able to have pastoral conversations with any of the ordained, and we're fortunate to have more than just one or two, but to really feel safe that what you're sharing will remain in confidence. This is a very important point. The sharing that happened in the Jukai training, people go deep. People get into it, you know what I mean? And we can get into it because we know it's a safe space to do that kind of sharing. So, interesting. 2,600 years ago, the Buddha said this matters. Not so different. They do not forsake you when you're in trouble. Oh, you're having a rough day? See you later. Right? Doesn't work like that. There's not one person who has been a good, healthy parent to their child that was only connected with them when it was easy. And that as soon as trouble comes, they left. That's not what a good parent looks like. That is not what a good friend looks like. Right? Sticking around, really being there. And again, I'm compelled to speak about this because I see that's what's happening here. And it's happening over time and through time. A lot of us have been around a long time now. Some of us first day in the space. But there's this intelligence in friendship that's emerging here because we all have this, at least the impulse and resonance of Dharma together. Now, not everybody in the Sangha is going to be immediately aligned with everyone else in the Sangha just because you're in the practice together, obviously. There's different affinities and that's all fine. But this core base that the Sangha does not leave when it gets difficult. I mean, you know, sometimes you're just waiting for that damn bell to ring. When is that bell going to ring? You know, and you know, you have the option to say, fuck it, and get up and leave. No one's going to like tackle you or anything. It's fine. Get back here. You know, it's not going to happen. You know, okay. You know, maybe sometimes that's a choice you need to make. Maybe you need to go sit down on the couch or something. That's fine. But basically, we learn over and over again to stay with it, even when it's not comfortable. Because, you know, sometimes Zazen is very pleasurable. Sometimes it's neutral. Sometimes it's a drag. Just like life, like no different. It's not an escape from life, it's an engaging in it. So why would it be any different? And yet when you practice it, it's like no matter what comes, for the next 20 minutes, I'm committed. Think about what qualities that encourages in you. Think about what qualities that nourishes and brings forth, that you experience in your own empowerment, your own self-empowerment. No one's sitting for you. There's some folks sitting next to you. But you sit your own period of Zazen. And when it gets difficult, you sit anyway. Don't mind. Oh, I can't give it. How can I talk? How can I work under these circumstances? You know, I mean, life is just a series of these circumstances. How else could you? They do not despise you. Seems like a little bit of a kicker at the end, but you know, if you think about it, the people that are closest to us are the ones that can really hurt us the most, right? The ones that you really let in. And when you really let somebody in, you're really becoming vulnerable. And despise, it might be aversion, it might be, I suppose we could play with lots of words in there, but there's this quality that happens. And a friend never does that. You know, there's all kinds of stories about, like, say there's a there's a rock band, high school kids, right? They get together, they're all co-friends, they're working on this band together, and suddenly they hit big. And it's great. They're having a great time until the singer is getting all the attention, right? And then the bass player is like, hey, what am I, chopped liver? And then suddenly a little rift can begin. You understand? And it can get, it can happen. I've seen it where people project onto a friend or onto a Sangha member or anyone in leadership, project a certain set of assumptions and requirements and fantasies and stuff. And then when the person doesn't meet those fantasies, then it completely turns the other way. Not just neutral, now you're evil. So I see a kind of even-keeledness being pointed to in these teachings. I would say they don't despise you, and also I'd say they don't cling to you. The Buddha didn't mention that here, but it's just the other side of the same disease. Not attaching, not clinging, not having an agenda for how you have to be in your world to count as my friend. Now, I'm assuming everything's healthy, okay? There are toxic folks that we need to draw barriers around, and that's fine, I understand that. A friend gives what is hard to give and does what is hard to do. They forgive you your harsh words. What does that assume? That you're going to be speaking some harsh words. And the Buddha knows all and stuff. So you very well may speak a harsh word or two. Has anybody here ever spoken a harsh word? Yeah? Okay. So it's okay. It's okay. It's okay that that's where the book landed. Right? It's perfect. Does it make sense? There's another thing that's kind of not said here directly, but a lot of times we want the other person to behave the way we want them to behave so that we can feel easier. We can feel better. We can have an easier time. So if you could just do X, Y, and Z, it'd be easier on me. Therefore, you do that. And that's not in this description. Not at all. They forgive you your harsh words and endure what is hard to endure. They tell you their secrets and preserve yours. They do not forsake you in difficulties, nor do they despise you. The person here in whom these qualities are found is a friend. One desiring a friend should resort to such a person. I think it's a healthy and wonderful thing to desire friends. It really is. And I remember my own experience when I went to Boston in '87, and music school was a very lonely place. It was a very competitive, aggressive, just a very competitive place. And a lot of the faculty were upset that they weren't famous. Let's say it like that. So you have all these kind of Top Gun students competing and these faculty that aren't where they hope to be. Some of them were, and they were great. But it wasn't until I found Sangha that I really found community, actual friends, and that made such a difference. And so I wish for all of us good Dharma friendships. There's a famous exchange between the Buddha and Ananda I'll close with. They were walking one day, and Ananda said, "Oh, holiness, oh Buddha, truly, truly, a full half of the spiritual life is having good Dharma friendships. Fully half." And the Buddha turned and looked very sternly at Ananda and said, "Ananda, don't you say that. Don't you say that." And of course, Ananda got, truly, Ananda, spiritual friendship is 100% of the path, no less. And then they bowed to each other and embraced. May we do the same.
We'll conclude with the Bodhisattva vows. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it. Beings are numberless. I vow to free them. Delusions are inexhaustible. I vow to end them. Dharma gates are boundless. I vow to enter them. The Buddha way is unsurpassable. I vow to embody it.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. That concludes our service for this evening. Are there announcements? We always have announcements. It's one of those rare evenings. If not, please enjoy your evening.